in this lesson, we're going to discuss the Security Content Automation Protocol. Now, the Security Content Automation Protocol, also known as SCAP or SCAP, plays a vital role in maintaining the security posture of an organization's technology infrastructure. The Security Content Automation Protocol is a suite of open standards that enhances the automation of vulnerability management, measurement, and policy compliance evaluation of systems that are deployed across your organization. So, what exactly is SCAP? Well, SCAP was developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, known as NIST, and is designed to provide organizations with a standardized approach to maintaining the security of their systems, and it includes a number of components that are used together to automate security tasks, including vulnerability scanning, configuration checking, and software inventory. Now, the Security Content Automation Protocol is a NIST framework that outlines various accepted practices for automating vulnerability scanning by adhering to standards for scanning processes, results reporting and scoring, as well as vulnerability prioritization. SCAP is also heavily used with internal and external compliance requirements because of all the different vulnerability scanners and tools will now support the same SCAP formatted data. This makes it really easy to transfer information from one tool to another tool because they're all speaking that exact same language, which we call SCAP. Now, there are three main languages that are used inside of SCAP. These are OVAL, XCCDF, and ARF. The first one we have is OVAL, which is pronounced OVAL. Now, OVAL is the Open Vulnerability and Assessment Language, which is an XML schema for describing system security states and querying vulnerability reports and information. OVAL is used to describe the system's information, the machine state, and the reporting for a given scan target. OVAL will allow us to have a consistent and interoperable way of collecting and assessing information about all of our targets, regardless of what tool was actually used to conduct the scan and vulnerability assessment of that target. Second, we have XCCDF. Now, XCCDF is the Extensible Configuration Checklist Description format, which is also an XML schema, but this one is used for developing and auditing best practice configuration checklists and rules. Before XCCDF was available, the best practice guides were long documents containing step-by-step guidance that told you exactly what to check. Each one might include 30 or 40 or 50 pages of detailed information, and during an assessment, you would print out that guide and then manually check all the steps in that guide one by one as you went through it. By migrating to XCCDF, though, we can now use scanning tools and automation to check our systems against those best practice guidelines using the XCCDF machine-readable format that can then be applied and validated using compatible software. Now, if your software doesn't support performing these checks automatically, it can still be used as your checklist as you're performing the manual steps and collecting your responses in that software tool as well, making XCCDF a really great option for you to consider. The third one we have is known as ARF. Now, ARF stands for the Asset Reporting Format, and this is again an XML schema, but it's being used to express information about the assets and the relationships between the assets and their reports. The standardized ARF data model is going to help us facilitate reporting, correlating, and fusing of asset information throughout and between our different organizations. ARF is really great because it's vendor and technology neutral, and it makes it very flexible and well suited to a wide variety of reporting applications. Now, in addition to these three languages used by the Security Content and Automation Protocol, or SCAP, we're also going to be supporting three different methods of enumerating our assets. These are known as CCE, CPE, and CVE. Now, first, we have CCE. CCE is the Common Configuration Enumeration. The CCE is a scheme for provisioning secure configuration checks across multiple sources. Essentially, CCE is a collection of configuration best practice statements that allows us to have these configurations and then use an automated tool to verify they're actually being properly used. The Common Configuration Enumeration will then go ahead and provide us with the unique identifiers for different system configuration issues. That way, we can quickly and accurately get a correlation of the configuration data across multiple information sources and tools. Second, we have CPE. Now, CPE stands for the Common Platform Enumeration. The Common Platform Enumeration is a scheme for identifying hardware devices, operating systems, and applications. CPE is written in a machine-readable format that begins with CPE, : and then has a series of information that's separated by colons. Now, the standard format of a CPE message is CPE : part, vendor, product, version, update, addition, language. Now, each platform being shared as a CPE will then be sent in this format. For example, the part portion of the CPE refers to whether or not the platform is actually an operating system, an application, or a piece of hardware. And to do this, we list this as either O, A, or H, depending on if it's an operating system, application, or piece of hardware. Third, we have CVEs. Now, a CVE is the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. The common vulnerabilities and exposures is a list of records where each item contains a unique identifier that's used to describe a publicly known vulnerability. Each CVE begins with CVE followed by the year and then a unique number. For example, if you search the CVE of CVE-2017-0144, this indicates this was a common vulnerability that was first identified back in 2017, and it was the 144th vulnerability that was identified that year. If you look up the description of this unique vulnerability, you will see it's a vulnerability that affects Microsoft Windows operating systems, and it's associated with an SMB protocol vulnerability. If you dig into this a little bit more, you'll start to see a description of the vulnerability, some references about the vulnerability, how the vulnerability can be exploited, and what you can do to stop or patch this vulnerability on your systems. Now, this particular CVE is actually pretty well known, and if you've been in the cybersecurity world for a while, you've probably heard of this CVE, which is known as Eternal Blue as its nickname, which is CVE-2017-0144. Now, technically, Eternal Blue is actually the tool that was used to exploit this SMB vulnerability, but most people in our industry started using it interchangeably to call it the Eternal Blue vulnerability when they were talking about CVE-2017-0144. Now, why do you care about Eternal Blue? What makes it so important? Well, back in 2017, this vulnerability was used by the WannaCry ransomware and it was spreading all over the internet. WannaCry was designed to exploit this specific vulnerability. So if you looked up CVE-2017-0144 and you followed the suggestions for installing the hotfix that Microsoft released or to disable SMB version 1, this was actually going to make sure you were not vulnerable to this exploit because only SMB version 1 or people who missed its software patch would be exploited as WannaCry started spreading across the internet. Next, we need to talk about how SCAP is going to be used to provide us with a metric system that's going to be called the CVSS or Common Vulnerability Scoring System. Now, there are currently multiple versions of CVSS, but the latest version is CVSS 3. CVSS 3 is going to be used to provide a numerical score to reflect the severity of a given vulnerability. This score ranges from 0 to 10, and this score will then be translated into a qualitative rating of how serious a vulnerability it is by calling it either none, low, medium, high, or critical. If you have a CVSS score of 0, then it's going to be considered none in terms of its criticality. If you have a score between 0.1 and 3.9, it's going to be considered low. If you have a score between 4.0 and 6.9, it's considered medium. If you have a score between 7.0 and 8.9, it's considered high. And if you have a score of 9.0 to 10.0, it's considered critical. Now, while these scores are helpful in aiding in your determination of how critical a vulnerability really is, it does not account for any mitigation that you may already have in place inside of your networks. For example, the Eternal Blue vulnerability is rated as an 8.1 on the CVSS 3 scale, making it a high level of criticality. But if your network already has SMB version 1 disabled before the exploit for the vulnerability was discovered, guess what? You're not subject to this attack, and it would become very low on your priority list of criticality in terms of remediation efforts because you're already protected against it. Finally, let's discuss the use of SCAP inside of benchmarking, which is one of the reasons for using SCAP in the first place. Now, a benchmark is a set of configuration rules for some specific set of products to provide a detailed checklist that can be used to secure the systems back to a specific baseline. These benchmarks are usually going to be expressed in the Extensible Configuration Checklist Description format known as XCCDF, which is an XML format specifying security checklists and reporting results of security benchmarks for your compliance and testing. Now, there are many SCAP benchmarks available for use by a variety of different system applications, including things like Red Hat Enterprise Linux benchmarks and the Center for Internet Security's Microsoft Windows 10 Enterprise benchmarks. For example, if you're using the Red Hat Enterprise Linux benchmarks, these provide you a comprehensive set of configuration rules for Red Hat Enterprise Linux servers that includes rules for configuring system authentication, setting up your firewalls, configuring your system logging, and much more. The CIS Microsoft Windows 10 Enterprise benchmark will also provide you a set of security configuration rules, but this time for the Microsoft Windows 10 Enterprise Edition, which includes rules for the user account control, data execution prevention, system firewall settings, and much more. These benchmarks, when used with a SCAP-compliant tool, can help organizations automate the process of maintaining system security and ensuring that your systems are configured correctly and that vulnerabilities are being identified and mitigated. So remember, the Security Content Automation Protocol, or SCAP, or SCAP, is a suite of open standards designed to automate vulnerability management, measurement, and policy compliance evaluation. SCAP benchmarks are sets of security configuration rules for specific sets of products, and there are 3 main languages used in SCAP, including OVAL, XCCDF, and ARF. When you're using SCAP for benchmarking, you're usually going to be using the XCCDF, or Extensible Configuration Checklist Description format, with your SCAP-compliant tools to help your organization to automate the process of maintaining your system security.